Hello, welcome October's live Q&A session with Elizabeth Walker. Wherever you are, I hope you're well and you're finding ways to do things that make you happy. As always, tonight's event on Zoom should also be streaming live to Facebook, and whether you're watching there or on Zoom, it would just be great if you could just reassure me that you can hear me okay. So my name is Jean and I coordinate the marketing at John Packer, and tonight's event is kindly sponsored by Pearl Flutes. This isn't the first time we've collaborated with Pearl or Elizabeth. In fact, in July last year, Elizabeth held a workshop in our showroom in Wellington with a number of aspiring flautists from the area. Everyone got access to some wonderful Pearl flutes. And it's been great to have the opportunity to work together again tonight. And also, thanks to platforms like Zoom and Facebook, we can now reach an even wider audience. I hope in all our promotion for tonight's events and previous webinars, it's been really clear that these events are very inclusive for all instrumentalists and musicians of all standards. Many themes like tone, breathing, and mindset translate across the musical family, so we'll be discussing all of these. As ever, I've got lots of questions that have been already sent in, but do feel free to send some more through the comment fields on Zoom or on Facebook. There are no silly questions, so please don't be shy. So without further ado, please let me present Elizabeth.
Hello.
Hello. I'm sorry about that. It's because we were a bit late starting because we were busy chatting, and I don't know what happened to that feed, but I thought I was live, and who knows what happened. But we're all set to go now, so that's fantastic.
Great.
Would you like to start with some playing, perhaps?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, brilliant.
Tiny bit of one of the arias I've arranged for two flutes that you can now play along with me if you go to Wonderful Winds. So I'm just going to play a little tiny, obviously on my own, extract on this wonderful Pearl flute.
Beautiful, setting the tone, calming me down. I think I needed that. Oh, lovely. Now, I mentioned earlier that you came to visit in Somerset, and obviously you teach at Wells Cathedral. Does Somerset feel a bit like a second home to you?
Well, it's been a home to me for 10 years, but during lockdown, remarkably, we moved. We've come back up to London, actually.
Oh, I see, right.
Which is fantastic, because actually I've been going down to Wales since September. Obviously, we then went into lockdown and nothing as we expected happened. But I have been going into Wales, and because we're on that sort of west bit, I'm onto the M3 and back down to Wales, and I stay over. So I do Monday, Tuesday, and it works really well. And because I've lived there for 10 years, it does feel like very familiar to go back each week. But
fantastic.
Very different in these times.
Yes. So was that because of the virus that you moved, or was this?
No. We'd already arranged the move, and in fact we obviously didn't want to move when it happened, because we lost our removal man. This is going very off topic.
Yes, it has.
we did manage to move, and we are here, but it had been planned for quite some years.
Okay, fantastic. Well, yes, let's go back then. Let's go back to the very beginning and how you got into playing music and the flute.
Yes, I mean, I was just very lucky, obviously, that my parents wanted me to play a musical instrument. My mother was a member of her local amateur orchestra. I used to go along at the very small age and just listen to all the instruments. In fact, as a child, I was already doing piano. I did that from very, very young, and violin, guitar, recorder. My mum taught the recorders in school. I should say she's not a musician, but she was a head teacher, actually, and she ran the recorder club. So that was sort of really the recorder was my introduction into wind instruments. But I did want to play a wind instrument, and the flute was actually an instrument my father had played in national service, and he thought, well, get my daughter to play the flute, and then I'll be able to teach her. And he said, well, I'll let you start for a
Yeah.
few weeks, and then I'll take over. And I have to say, I did get to grade 8 within 2 years, so
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
I
Yeah.
quite fast on the flute. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe because I'd done enough recorder beforehand.
Hmm.
But I did just take to the flute. And as I say, within 2 years, I was doing my grade 8. So then I became a junior exhibitioner at the Royal College of Music,
Oh,
which
it sounds very,
was
doesn't it?
really exciting as a child. Yeah, it was fabulous.
So what age was that then,
So
specifically?
I started at 8. I had taken my grade 8 by 10, 11, sort of by the time I got into secondary school. And then I started at the Royal College Junior Department when I was 12, where I stayed until, I went to Guildhall when I was
Yeah,
18. Yeah.
fantastic. Um, so were there any, I mean, was your father then perhaps your inspiration, or were there any other flautists that you've
Actually, no, I never got to hear him play the flute.
really?
By the time he decided he was going to be my teacher, I'd already sort of hop skipped over him, and so
Okay.
he never. I don't remember ever hearing him play. Uh,
It's
so no,
prove it.
he wasn't really. I mean, I would say, of course, the teachers are the inspiration. I mean, the lovely friend of my mum's who played in the local orchestra, she was my teacher, and until I went to junior college. Um, I was very lucky in the 70s that Sir Jimmy Galway came over, played in Chichester Cathedral. He signed I was reading Roald Dahl, and he
Uh-huh.
signed my book. And yeah, I mean, he completely, as he did so many youngsters in the 70s, I
Mhm.
mean, he was just an inspirational character at
Yeah.
that. It was the character as well as the player. I think at the time I probably didn't understand, what an amazing player I was listening to, but it was that whole sort of, yeah,
Yeah, the package.
the package. And then
Yeah.
of course there were loads of us flute players. There were flute players everywhere, but I mean, that is the sort of inspiration, isn't it? That we need always, because
Yeah, and a
that
good
does
head
sort of,
teacher at schools as well, who value music. So clearly your mum was a, brilliant head
yes.
teacher as well.
Absolutely. And music was always on in our household, which, of course, again, you never really understand how
Mm.
unique that is because you just take it for granted.
Yeah, I mean, if more children went to watch orchestras and just got immersed in that music, it would be a great inspiration.
Indeed.
Anyway, we shall talk more about orchestras and things probably a little bit later on. So we'll go look at some of the other questions that we've got here. So you've mentioned that you also play some other instruments, the violin and the,
I was
the guitar.
awful at the violin, I must say, and worse at the guitar.
Actually, my first instrument was guitar, and I think I got to chord F, and it was just too difficult.
So
Um,
hard. Loved
yeah.
it though, and haven't forgotten it. But
So, if you weren't a flautist, what else would you have been? Was there any ever doubt that you wouldn't go into
that's a
music?
really interesting question, because when I thought about that, actually, do you know, I do feel as if I'm not just a flautist now. I'm a mom, and I'm a
Sure.
cook. I go to Pilates, which I adore. I think if I wanted to retrain as a different teacher, I now might look at that. But I'm a singer.
Yeah.
I don't think of myself as just a flute player. So yes, to that extent, there
Yeah.
isn't anything that I think, oh, I would have been a hairdresser or something. No, I think I've just had the life that I've had, but just without flutes, which would be really sad.
Yeah. Okay. And so you mentioned that you're teaching. How do you think your pupils would describe you as a teacher?
Oh, that's a really great question, and a fairly horrifying one too. I mean, always, of course, if teachers have been your inspiration through your life, of course, I'd love them to say that I was in some shape or form, introducing them to something and therefore being a bit inspiring. But um, I know that I'm not probably very strict. So they probably say I'm a bit of a pushover, but my teaching style is very much, throwing ideas out there and hoping that they catch one of them.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So, because I suppose, do you teach many beginners, or is it tends to be students who are already quite, at a quite high
I
level?
have taught beginners, and at Wells Cathedral School, where I do most of my teaching now, we do have junior school going all the way up,
Mhm.
and I love teaching beginners actually. But I would say the majority of my pupils do tend to be at the more sort of senior end, and being a specialist music school,
Sure.
there are quite a lot there who are far from beginners. That doesn't mean that there aren't some little tweaks that we have to do to sort of sort some
Mhm.
things out. But no, I don't teach that many beginners or through the grades anymore, but I certainly have done over the years.
Great, great. So, right, I think we've covered our first section, really. Oh, perhaps we might just go back off of one of those questions about what you feel like really distinguishes the flute from the other instruments in the woodwind family for you.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm at the moment playing in a wind quintet, and probably that's the most sensible sort of ensemble to go and have a little sort of look at. How do composers treat the flute differently from the other instruments, and certainly. We generally float above the texture of the wind quintet. We're playing the Nielsen wind quintet, which is a wonderful piece, and the flute is often above the oboe, so often in octaves, and my line is sort of just adding that extra color. um and I think the flute's characteristic is that one of, it's slightly more sort of fluid and compared to the other
Sure.
instruments. um I think the incredible difference with flutes is that, the use of our air, the fact that most of it goes over the top. So we have, huge challenges really with breathing phrases.
Mm,
um and I'm sure my colleagues would say yes, it's the same on the bassoon, it's the same on the horn, but somehow all of their air is used so directly down
yeah.
into the instrument, whereas we're sort of, as I say, sort of floating over the top, but also allowing an awful lot of our shaping to be guided by the breathing.
Mm, yeah. Very good. Um, so before we've got lots of questions about technique, but I thought before we go through those questions, because they're probably going to take a majority of time, we just talk about your setup, about the flutes that you use.
Yes.
Obviously you've got your pearl artist, so there's a pearls feature quite heavily, but also Renaissance flutes as well, which are really interesting. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about the
Yes,
flutes.
I can't really angle my computer, but I did end up getting them all out of the cabinet. I've got a cabinet next door. For a long time, all my flutes were in storage, but I've got them all now. Um, so I can show you them all. I probably won't play them all because they all need require quite a little bit of warming up.
Sure.
But they are all on my YouTube. You can hear absolutely all of these flutes. So this one's my Renaissance flute. It's actually very, very unusually made out of boxwood. Most of them are maple and then stained. This one's by an Italian, Philadelphia Puglisi, who came out to Tuscany where I was teaching last summer. And it was amazing to meet him because I'd had this flute for a very long time and not met the maker.
Mhm.
And he gave a very inspiring talk to us that he'd actually seen all the Renaissance flutes that are in existence. And there's about 150. They're all in museums. None of them are allowed to be played because they're just too precious. But he's allowed to measure them. And as you can see, it's just one continuous piece of wood, which is why this one's so rare that it's boxwood. He was explaining that he's tried so many times to make a boxwood Renaissance flute, and it'll crack, or he won't be able to get a continuous piece. Boxwood's a very slow growing tree.
Is that like the box that you get in hedges?
Yes. So if you go to Hampton Court, which is now down the street from us,
Oh, nice.
you see that the hedges are very low, and in order to make a boxwood tree long enough to make a branch that's going to be this long, that's very slow growing.
Mm.
In fact, I was once with a very good friend of mine, Jacqueline Sorel, who makes recorders, and we went to Hampton Court, and she was just like, "Oh, look at please, box.
Quick, give me a saw.
You want to get a flute maker that makes wooden flutes. Very excited. Take them to Hampton Court. So what happened with this flute is it was made into little families of flutes, like the recorders. So there's a G flute that's a little one. This is the one which is the most sort of similar to the flute that we now play. And then there's a bass flute, which is a great big one.
Yep.
There's not that much repertoire. French chansons you can play on Renaissance flutes, but they're basically quite modal in the key of if you think D minor.
Okay.
If it's in D minor, I can play it. If it isn't, I can't. So it doesn't have a chromatic scale. It has a very beautiful tone. Do go and have a little listen to Renaissance flutes. And then
yes.
that goes into this one, which is a Baroque flute.
Oh, it looks a bit like a tenor recorder. He's got that kind of, that owless recorder look, doesn't it? When everything's
similar dimensions. It's much thicker here than it is here. So it's got a tapered bore. That's quite important, actually. The tapered bore, the fact that it's got interchangeable pieces meant that they had what they call a corde de rechange here. So they'd have different sizes here, which allowed it to go into different pitches. Pitch is another very complex issue, but we're not at A440. This one's A415, but it can go down to 395, which is what we call French Baroque pitch, if you like. And it could have an interchangeable section here that would make it go up to 430, which is what we call classical pitch. But it's all a bit hit and miss without the corde de rechange, and they would have changed the height of the cork up here to correspond with the bit that's here, and some of them had screws at the foot so that they could balance out. It's more chromatic than this one by a long way. I'm no longer unable to play in different pitches, and if we're thinking composers, we've got to Bach here. So Bach, Handel, Telemann, all of the French Baroque, the Boismoitié, Leclerc, de la Barre, all on this wonderful flute. Absolutely gorgeous flute. This is by Rod Cameron. I've had it since I started Baroque flute back in the 80s. Very beautiful flute, this one. It's a copy. They're copies again. I mean, you can get original Baroque flutes, but they're fairly rare.
Yeah, sure.
And from that, we go to this one. It's quite hard to hold it in the screen.
It's like Thunderbirds kind of going across the screen, isn't it?
A little bit, isn't it? What I want you to see is that the dimensions again are quite
a bit longer.
It's got that tapered bore. So this end is really, really narrow compared to this end, which is really, really thick. It's got keys, but it plays the same as a Baroque flute if you needed it to, but because we've got more keys on, what we're able to do is play again a little bit more chromatically. This flute, the really important thing to know about this 8-keyed flute, apart from the fact that it's Mozart, very important, very important composer, Beethoven, Rossini, really tricky old Rossini. But if we look at the Paris Conservatoire and the whole French school of music, of flute playing, French flute playing, this flute was the favoured flute until the 1880s. So although we had a modern flute, and by modern I mean Boehm system with all the keys, this is the flute that they were teaching in Paris. And the reason for that was that it's so difficult to play. Once you've mastered it and you've got into the Paris Conservatoire, you're not going to want to play a different system.
Yeah.
The reason it's difficult is it's quite hard to nip off these little keys. Then they're not terribly logical, not for us anyway. Fairly logical for a Baroque flute player. You basically play an A and then you put a key down and it makes it into it lifts it, so you become an A sharp or a B flat. If you want to play a G, actually that looks quite similar because there's a G sharp.
Yeah.
If you play an F, you play an E and then open with a key.
Okay.
That gets your head whirring.
Yeah. Do you find if you're playing, do you have to spend a bit of time with it just to kind of get your head back into that?
A little bit. I mean, this one, I was very lucky. I went over to Holland to do a postgraduate, and I spent 3 years with Wilbert Hazelzet in The Hague, exclusively playing this flute. And that's quite rare, actually. Most of my colleagues, bless them, learnt on the job. You know,
Sure.
they were Baroque flute players. The groups, the ensembles went into the classical repertoire. They were, you know, quickly grappling with the flute.
Yeah.
And indeed, my teacher Wilbert was in that situation. He was in the orchestra learning it. I was exceedingly lucky. I was just a student learning it with him, and it felt really exploratory. It was really good fun, actually. But I did a lot of hours on this instrument, which stands me in very good stead, because out of all of the flutes that I play, sadly, this is the one I probably play the least. Even though we've got all of that wonderful repertoire, the Mozart, the Beethoven, that's all sort of orchestral repertoire. In terms of solo flute playing, I haven't been asked to do the Mozart flute concerto very often. Never.
Well, we should make that happen.
It's such a shame, isn't it? I did this wonderful course at Benslow on the Mozart flute concertos, and somebody asked on the course, so when did you last play it? Never.
Oh, well, it should
I
happen.
have played all the Mozart operas, for which I'm very grateful. So from this flute, we go in straight away. This is my original Louis Lot. So this is an original flute. It was made in Paris in 1859. She is my prize and treasure, and I call her a she because she's a very, very delicate, very sort of feminine flute, actually. I have got a Berger flute next door. I haven't brought that one through today because it's very similar, but that's like a masculine version of this. This is a very, very refined.
Yeah, it's almost like a clarinet, isn't it, with those keys?
Because of the ring keys. Again, if we look at the dimensions, we've got a conical bore, almost identical, actually. In bore, it probably isn't, actually. If you're a maker, you'd say, what are you talking about? But it sort of feels and looks and responds actually quite similarly to my 8-keyed flute. It's very interesting. If I've been at flute conventions and very, very, very fine flute players have picked this flute up, they can't make a noise, and they go, how do you play that flute? But it's because it's set up to me to be pretty similar to that 8-keyed flute. So Louis Lot, he's your, so I go back a step. Boehm invented the key system. He did for clarinets too. There's your similarity. He was a jeweler, and his skill was actually in inventing this system, which is where your lever can leave the key up.
Okay.
Up until now, if you look at my 8-keyed flute, it's the key is down, and then it's a very easy process to just click it open.
Yeah.
This one's actually sitting up, and then you press it down. So that enabled him to double the amount of holes and make the flute entirely chromatic. Interestingly, in England, there were loads of different systems going along. In France, Boehm chose Louis Lot as his master maker, and these flutes were very popular. Not at the Paris Conservatoire, not to begin with, but from players' perspectives, they could see Louis Dorus. He was playing this in the Paris Orchestra. It's a beautiful, beautiful flute. Louis Lot made about 50-50 wood and silver flutes around this time. He also was experimenting with the bore dimensions. If you look at your piccolo, it's still tapered bore. The flutes, it was a really hot subject, and they were doing all sorts of experimental tests with projection of sound, which was basically what they were looking for. My hunch is that they got it wrong, actually. I think this flute, I mean, when I've played it in an orchestra, my husband says it's just got one of those sounds that just pierces to the back. But I can tell you, if I'm playing it right here, I'm never satisfied with the sound. And I go to my pearl flute, and it just, it's very satisfying. Who wants a flute that you've got to struggle with?
Sure.
Even though my hunch is that this flute probably has a better ability to sort of cut through the texture in an orchestra than your modern flutes. But that's my personal hunch
Yeah.
that we ended up going the wrong way. So then if we compare this with the Pearl flute, I mean, apart from the metal being different,
It's
this
very
one's
shiny.
super shiny because it's brand
Yes.
new. You can sort of see that the key system is identical,
Yeah.
except for the G sharp. This is called a Dorus G sharp. It's where the G sharp key is on its own little post here. And some people will know of the open G sharp, closed G sharp debate. Boehm actually invented the open G sharp. But again, most likely, this system won out at some point where your G sharp key is shut at the back.
Hmm.
Your key will open that G sharp. So it's what we call a closed G sharp. If it's an open G sharp, which is actually one of the wooden flutes that I sometimes play, that's when the G sharp's on the top. And I think the joy of that, particularly if you're working in wood, is that it's then an uninterrupted piece of wood, or in this case it would be metal. By putting this on the back, it sort of interrupts the flow somehow, and also chromatically it's not as logical.
Yeah.
Another big debate,
Mm.
and I think because student flutes are not made with that open G sharp, most of us, including me, learned on a closed G sharp.
Yeah. Yeah.
You put your head into a complete spin and relearn on an open G sharp. You're going to really want to invest in doing that.
Yeah.
When I play my wooden flute, I have to swap back, which is something I can clearly. I've
Yes.
got a facility to be able to do because I play all these different flutes. So, and I do have two different Pearl flutes with me today because this is my the flute that I normally play. That's the one I own. And I have.
That's a slightly different colour to the other one.
It is. It's also a slightly it's a slightly more professional model in terms of its costs a little bit more. And it's gold plated. It's not solid gold, it's gold plated. It's got a really lovely sound, and it's my flute that I chose a couple of years ago to play. This one I don't own. I've got to pack it up and send it back tomorrow.
And this is the new flute from Pearl.
The new flute from Pearl, and it's very exciting to have it, I must say. And I haven't had it very long. It got a little bit stuck at customs. But it arrived at the end of last week, and so I did take it up to Wells, and my students, poor loves, had to play endless duets with me playing this flute. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I really, really, genuinely will be very sad to pack it up and send it home tomorrow. So it's the Pearl Elegante Primo. So it's a foundation. I'm going to read a text here. You can
That's
see
fine.
it in your text. Pearl's foundation Japanese handmade flute. It comes with as all the Pearl flutes do, which is so brilliant. You've always got a choice of the two head joints. So this one actually has a forte head joint. This one has a vivace head joint. So
what's the difference between those two head joints?
So the forte head joint, again, if I read the text of what they tell you, and then I'll tell you what I think.
Yes.
Forte head joint, it says, is developed in collaboration with Benoit Fromanger. I should know him. Sorry, and I've probably said that terribly badly. It offering plenty of resonance and produces a dark centered tone. A wide dynamic spectrum is ensured throughout the entire range of the instrument. It also underlines the level of volume that the Elegante Primo offers. So I think to de-scramble what they're saying there, what I'm finding is it's very, very open. So you want to actually just fill it up with lots and lots and lots of sound, which is great. However, it also still manages to play really quietly, which for me is very important. I don't always want to play really.
Sure.
Really.
Yeah.
It's got a good spectrum of colours. It's easy to play, which is so nice. So nice. And I've spent many years struggling with difficult flutes, and they give a huge amount back if you've got the time. But if you want to pick up a flute and you don't want to spend hours and hours finding your sound, if you like, this flute will just respond. I tried to play all sorts of difficult, tricky things like overtoppies and things. Just nails it. What a joy.
Fantastic.
So the other head joint, the vivace joint, which is what I've got on here, it says, is a combination of the forte and the vivo cuts. It allows more resistance than the forte head joint and has a wide spectrum of tone colours, best to be experienced by playing it yourself. So I think what I found, going back to when I was, trying to find my new flute, I think I found that the vivace one was, a little bit more challenging to begin with, but when you get used to it, has a little bit more sort of variety in it.
And does it ever matter about your particular embouchure that you should try a different cut or
I think that's exactly what it does depend on. I mean, that's the joy in a way of having the choice with Pearl, because we all play slightly differently, and we all get a lot, we're all listening out for different things. So I think it is important to recognize that not one fit suits all.
Yeah, and get something with a tone that suits you.
It's a very personal thing, and I think the fact that you get that sort of choice with Pearl is one of their real selling points, actually.
Fantastic. So how long have you been playing Pearl flute?
I've been playing an alto and a bass Pearl flute all my life, and a piccolo pretty much all my life. But I didn't come to their silver flutes until probably 2-3 years ago now, so not very recently. I've always played on wooden flutes, but I've also always played in a fantastic flute quartet, Festive Flutes. We were formed in the 80s when we were all at Guildhall together.
Oh, fantastic.
And
did you all have shoulder pads as well?
Yeah, there's some fabulous old photos actually. In fact, most of them are coasters now, because we had our 30th birthday not that long ago, and I made loads of coasters. So
oh, fantastic. You like Bananarama.
Hi, girls. Anyway, they were my inspiration in a way for trying to look like them, if nothing else, but also my teaching at Wells. Increasingly, I was trying to show my students how to make the sound that I was asking them to make, but actually not really representing that by playing just wooden flutes. So that was at that time that I tried lots of flutes and loved my Pearl flute. So
fantastic. I just want to backtrack just slightly, because I was intrigued. Did getting into sort of the Renaissance flutes, was that something that happened when you were at college? Was that deliberately so, or was it just an opportunity that
yes, so I was at Guildhall 1985, and in 1985 there was this absolute explosion of early music. Not just playing authentically with the Baroque, but also going earlier into the Renaissance. So my first Renaissance flute gig was in the Royal Albert Hall in the Proms. And I know, how lucky was that? In, I think, 1988. Possibly. So that was through the recorder. I was booked to play in Pretorius's Dances of Terpsichore on recorder, but then there was a little Renaissance flute. So I was sent to go and research a Renaissance flute, get a few lessons, and then stand and play it in the Albert Hall, which was terrifying. So that was my introduction through the recorder, really.
Sure.
So I started Renaissance flute at Guildhall, and then Stephen Preston was there teaching Baroque flute at the time. Had just a few lessons before then deciding to go out to Holland and do it, really serious.
Yeah. Well, I suppose you've already been playing sort of traditional flute for me. It's just the opportunity to do something then different was an opportunity too good to miss. Really,
I think that, plus the fact that if you're a recorder player, that whole style, the Handel sonatas, they're half written for recorder, half for flute. So you know the style already. The Telemann Fantasias that I've recorded on modern flute, actually, but I studied them all on recorder. And then it's automatic that you think, oh, well, actually, they're written for flute. So I'm a flute player. Why don't I try them?
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that was the routine was actually, funnily enough, slightly more recorder than it was flute.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So just a couple more questions related to that. So what is your favourite flute for playing CPE Bach?
Well, that would, I'm afraid, have to be on Baroque flute. I think it's very important if you love Baroque music, and that's where your heart lies.
Mm.
I think you're going to find it really satisfying to play it on a Baroque flute. It's written for that instrument. It comes alive in that instrument. That is not to say, I stress, that is not to say you cannot play it on modern flute. And you know, I did choose to record both the CD of Bach flute sonatas and the Telemann Fantasias on a modern flute. So I cannot say, you know, I won't play them on modern flute. Please
Sure.
don't play them. Not at all. But the enjoyment, the thrill, the opening up of the repertoire comes, I think, from experiencing it on Baroque.
Sure. So for amateur players who potentially, you know, don't have that same opportunity, is there any way that they can still kind of get in and or like try a Baroque flutes? Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible, and I would encourage it. I must say that there are now student priced. It's the price, really. I mean, not that actually Baroque flutes are terribly expensive. I mean, the most top of the range Baroque flute, you can probably pick up secondhand under £1,000, to be honest. So, you know, the potential of getting a really good flute is possible, and the student versions, so Martin Venner's making a student flute. I think it retails at 700. So, you know, it's possible. I know it's still, you know, expensive. It's I think it's probably affordable, and it's good fun. It is really tricky. The other alternative is to maybe just look at getting a wooden head. There's some fantastic wooden head joints around. It's not quite the same, but it's closer.
Yeah.
But you know, I've been running these lovely courses with Benslow, and we've, I think, for the first time, because of Zoom, been able to teach both Baroque and modern at the same time, because we can use the mute buttons, do the warm-up exercises at different pitches, because it's the pitch problem that's really. And because of those that experience, I'm very proud and thrilled to be able to say that we've got more Baroque flute players now, because they're having a little go.
Yeah.
Because they're hearing this repertoire on Baroque and thinking, wow, that's good. So yeah.
Yep. So one final question about that. So if you're doing a performance on Renaissance Baroque flute, you know, how do you prepare for that? I was just interested because of the changing in the pitch as well. Obviously, if you're going into a cold environment and you're warming up, you know, do you have to warm up and then change it to something else? I mean, how would you deal with that?
So I've very, very rarely, only really done it in a workshop environment, played all the flutes in one sort of session, as it were.
Sure.
It's very unusual to need to play more than one instrument in a concert, for example. So in terms of warming one instrument up while you're playing another one, that doesn't really happen. Although I've often played recorder and Baroque flute in the same program, and then I've just asked, normally my husband sitting in the audience, to stick an instrument under his arm to warm it up for me. Because you can't really play on cold wooden instruments, it's true. But normally I would, for example, pre-COVID times, I might have had a Mozart opera in my diary, and then I will make sure that I haven't got any modern concerts just before, and just make sure it's timetabled carefully, because it isn't easy. I really wouldn't be happy to pick up an 8-keyed flute and just play it cold.
Yeah.
I need a little bit of lead-in time. The wooden flutes also take a little bit of time to warm up, which sounds a bit silly, but the wood has to sort of, and I have to get used to the change of playing. So we are very lucky with our modern flutes, and I think increasingly, you know, going back to this wonderful new Pearl flute model, they're remarkably easy to play. You know, I really can, you know, get out of bed, roll out of bed and play this, and it'll sound all right, actually. Can't say the same about my early flutes. No. Got life a little bit easier.
Yeah. So we've got all these technical questions now. So what I thought, because there was one we were slightly unsure about, so I'm just going to mention it now, and if that person is here, then they can maybe just clarify, and we could come back to it. This was about playing. We weren't sure if it was E's or B flats, but a lazy ring finger. Just to clarify, is it B flat or B or E? Which is about exercises to help with that. So if you're here and want to just clarify just your question, that would be helpful, because we were a bit unsure about that one. But moving on to the next one, flutter tonguing. How does one flutter tongue?
Well, I couldn't flutter tongue as a child. I went to a speech therapist who taught me round and round the ragged rock, rugged rascal rang. Hey! So it's quite possible that I've got a very lazy R anyway. So
I think I'm a bit similar with my O's, I think.
R's, yeah, lazy R's, lazy O's, they're quite common, and I've had lots of students who say, I can't flutter tongue, and it isn't easy. It's about relaxing the sides of the tongue, so that when you do your bring, it's sort of around the side. I spent years not being able to do it. I did the in the back of the throat. Not nice. No, it's well worth going round saying round and round or ragged rascal ran until you can see him.
And so what's the effect on that when you play the flute? Would you be able to just how?
Yes, I mean it's still quite tricky because you still got to blow at the same time. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, that's fun.
Like the bumblebee time.
Fantastic. So top tips, exercises that might help develop a range of dynamics in the high register. So instead of just F and sort of forte and forte.
So for the top register, we do want to play in more than one dynamic, and the loud one is often a little bit of a shortcut when you're learning. If you are a bit of a lazy teacher, you can just say blow hard and you'll get into the top octave. Now that blow hard is why it's coming out really loudly, and actually there are many other ways of getting into the top octave that don't mean just blow hard. Plus, if you think of the variety of blowing hard, you've got just letting the air out fast, but you've also got holding on to the air and letting it out with concentration. So like a syringe, you're sort of pushing really hard, but not actually letting that sound, that air just puff into the flute. So there's blowing sort of hard but not fast, if you like. The other thing is position. We do have the ability to move our jaw. And if you think about, on a hot day, you go, well, it's hot.
Yeah.
And you blow up. That's what we're trying to do. So if you use maybe some harmonics on the bottom C. I've been skipping some there, but you can position the airstream. So finger a bottom note. C is probably a good one, and then make sure that your jaw is sending that air up. So a combination of moving the jaw, sending the air, into a deeper, firmer place, so that you don't let all the air out fast, because then that's what makes it loud.
Yeah, fantastic. I remember my sister playing the flute a little bit, and it was just blow hard. I think she was
it'll get you. See, the problem is it gets you up there.
Yeah.
But then that's not
necessarily
the sound you want.
That's fascinating. I never thought of that. So it's brilliant. So do you think quiet breathing is important? And if so, how is it achieved when playing very fast technical passages which require fast breaths?
Right, this always makes me smile, because my lovely accompanist of choice, lovely Richard Shaw, stops playing the piano when he can hear me breathe. And that focuses the mind. We all have a tendency to breathe a little bit loudly. Sometimes it's good because you can be expressive with that. But 9 9 times out of 10 we don't really want
It's a bit like tennis players.
Yeah, you do. And it's sort of slightly lazy, which is why Richard pulls me up short on it, because if you think about that's a vocalization. If you don't do that, it's totally possible to breathe quietly.
Yeah.
I also think if you really focus again your breath lower, that lower place is not here, and that vocalization is much higher. Whereas here,
Your Pilates must really help, because you do so much to think about your breathing.
Pilates does, except there's a very, very subtle difference in that Pilates you breathe in and you blow straight back out again. And I have to say, with flute players, we all know that we breathe in and we try and control.
Yeah.
We control. I'm always being told in Pilates, you're allowed to breathe out, Liz. You don't have to hold on to it.
Right. So, tips on stable third register F sharp.
I wonder whether this question is from somebody who hasn't learned the gorgeous trick of this F sharp. So normally we learn the top octave just by taking this middle finger off here. But it's a very sharp and unstable top F sharp. So try this fingering. And that should help. It's lower and it's more stable. The other thing is maybe treat yourself to a new flute. Some flutes are really, really, really narky up there. I mean, they just are. And other flutes are really stable. So if you're trying or you're wanting a new flute and you don't know what to try out, because actually that's quite tricky too. I know that hasn't come up as a question, but if you're trying an instrument, how do you do that? What are the things to look out for? And playing up in that top octave, checking that it's easy to get to some certain notes. As I think I mentioned before, that the top E is one that cracks. We've got that wonderful Trochner Blumen, I mean, that phrase comes over and over and over again. A lot of flutes will struggle with that interval, and it'll crack. So, take those pieces with you that you've been having problems with.
Take the issues.
Trying out new flutes.
I would mention actually, so in the shop, unfortunately people at the moment still can't try instruments out, but you can take them away. So, you can take a selection and try them in your home, which sometimes is a bit more comfortable anyway, because you might feel less self-conscious. I mean, we're very friendly anyway in the shop, so you should never feel nervous about playing in front of us. But it's nice to sometimes have an instrument for a little while just to get used to it, like you have done with that pearl flute as well, and get established with it.
And it is really important to play, obviously, your favourite pieces, of course, but you also ought to check out those ones that you've struggled with.
Yeah.
Because we always sort of blame ourselves, don't we? We always think, oh, I can't do that. But actually, there's a I know you're not supposed to blame your tools, only the bad workmen do that. But it is possible, if you've been struggling with a piece, when you're trying a new instrument, give it a whirl. You find that actually it's a lot easier, and then it answers the question, so it begs the question, do you want a flute that plays that easily?
Or do you want to try one with a wooden head joint and just hear a different sound? Yeah, absolutely. There's so many different ways you can just have a practice.
And it's not that you want the easy option, it's just that some flutes respond really, really well to you because of the way you blow or whatever, and some don't. And that's what I would definitely advocate. If the starting point when you're just trying a flute means that it's good, then you're going to want to leap out of bed and play your flute, because it's fun, it's good, it works.
Yes, definitely.
So if it's not working, have that in the back of your mind that might be a possibility.
Definitely. Right. So how to make beautiful sound of especially higher note.
That's a similar thing I would suggest. A lot of us blow too hard, or the worst, isn't it, is when you squeeze into that top octave and you go, oh, I don't like it up there. practice up in there way more than you do. I mean, my students are still reluctant. You know, we do 3 octave scales all the way up to top D, and they try and get out of it. No, don't get out of it. Put yourself through it. The sooner you practice up there, the quicker you're going to think, oh, it's just
It's okay.
it's
And
fine.
do you use a tuner to help with those situations?
I do use a tuner to help. That's very, very, very revealing sometimes. If you shut down, if you squeeze,
Hmm.
if you don't position, the intonation will be troublesome. And I think more than that, actually, if you think again, if I was talking about back to my wind quintet and the fact that the flute's always right up there. Composers love putting the flute up at the top. They love it. It can in the texture.
Hmm.
They want that beautiful, beautiful. There's the clue in the word. They
Yes.
want that beautiful top octave. So you mustn't avoid it in your practice. And I think we do spend a lot of time practicing that first 2 octaves. I mean, and they're the ones that we've probably spent the first 2 years of our lives playing to. So we need to catch up. We need to actually, put the effort in on the top and get really good at playing. And so if you've got a favorite melody, play it up there. Don't just play it low
Yeah, that's
down.
a good idea. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I suppose it's also you're reading the ledger line as well, so it's that's
There can be fear in the ledger lines, whereas if you could use cards and just test yourself with the ledger lines. I always think it's quite a good party trick. I'll never forget my daughter writing out a ridiculously stupid note she thought, and I just said, oh yeah, it's a C. She was like, huh, how do you know that?
it's just good practice.
Yes, and it's
Yeah.
fun, isn't it? We can read them up there. I can't read any of those piano ones that go off the. I have to get the dictionary out. What's that note? But the top ones, yeah, we can do that. So take some pride in the fact that you can read
Yeah.
all the way off the top of the ledger lines.
And best technique for vibrato now.
Ah, right. Well, that's a great opportunity for me to plug my book, isn't it? I've written a Baroque studies for modern flute book, and in there I've got a vibrato exercise. Best thing, just make sure that you can play straight first, and then start using what I call the motor from low down. So you're going to go above and make sure you go below. If you look at a cellist, I mean, my daughter's a cellist, which I'm saying cellist. You can see that their hand doesn't just go up; it goes below as well. So we tend to have a very sharp flute otherwise. You can hear that I'm letting go
Mm-hmm.
as much as I'm going over. That's a very quick answer, but it is all in my book. But basically, just undulate above and below, speeding it up. I'm not a great fan of the sort of playing a vibrato to a metronome, mostly because I like to feel that you can have a bit more flexibility in the vibrato. And when you do put it into the musical line, remember to use vibrato between the notes, not just on the notes. Otherwise, you can have a sort of almost metronomic sound, and that's not very natural.
It's important, I suppose, for people to get their own sound of their own tone as well. A bit like a singer might have curate their own
Yeah.
sound, perhaps. Do you think?
Yes, and there are some teachers I know who are really sort of dissuade teachers from talking about vibrato because they feel as if it's a very natural part of yeah, the characteristic of the player. And I would agree with that. However, there's often a moment I find with my students where it's worth exploring the fact that you can actually use vibrato as an expressive tool, and therefore it's you need to understand how to play with and without.
Yeah.
You can explore the expressive nature of vibrato. So I
Because I
think it
suppose
is
for
worth exploring.
for sort of students, and it can feel probably sort of as a bit of embarrassment as well, because it's you expressing yourself, and with
Yeah.
delicate, impressionable people that they're a bit embarrassed about. expressing themselves too much, perhaps.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But at the end of the day, it is part of our sort of paint box of,
Yes, indeed.
of expression. So it is worth exploring, I think.
So another question about technique. It is very breathy when I play. How can I improve my tone? Is it my breathing or my embouchure?
I would say it's possibly a little bit of both. I mean, without actually sort of hearing what's going on,
Hmm.
there may be an opportunity to think a little bit about this positioning. But also, I talk a lot about a straw and wrapping the lips around the straw. It is very important that we match up our embouchures with the lip plate here, that it's in line. Could be that there sometimes, you see this and
Hmm.
you can see that that's not going to work because it's not fine. So there are things to explore with that. And finally, going back to that idea that Pearl offered two different heads, the reason for that is it's the cut of the embouchure, and it could be that the breathiness is because you've got too open an embouchure hole for the stage that you're at that stage.
Hmm.
So there's lots to explore, and it's too complex and I can't really solve this one without.
No, no, I appreciate that. I suppose if you,
I think that the things to explore are thinking about maybe a smaller embouchure hole, thinking about the alignment. It's rarely to do with air because we do need to use the air, but it could be that there's too much coming out and not enough being stored.
Mhm.
It is an important part of what we do, that we breathe, but then we put it under a certain amount of resistance there and not just go because that's obviously too much air
Yeah,
coming out. So they're the things to think about. If all else fails, go and try some different heads. Maybe
yeah.
it's a flute that's not suiting you for whatever reason.
So another question, what advice would you give to a new player?
Ooh. One thing that does occur to me, it may be just me, but I used to sit and play the piano even though I wasn't very good at it because it was just there. So I sometimes say to students, if it's safe enough, leave your flute out, because then when you walk into the room and you see your shiny flute just sitting there, you might want to play it. Now, obviously, that comes with a reservation that it doesn't want to be knocked. If you've got siblings or
Mhm.
a dog or a cat that's going to knock it flying, that might not be a sensible piece of advice. So only if it's possible.
Yeah,
But that just might be the one that because I know it takes 2 seconds to get a flute out of a case, but just occasionally that case is tucked away in the school bag, or and you're just not seeing it, and
mhm.
therefore if it was out, just sitting there,
You might just, yeah.
shining you, saying, "Play me,
Baby.
I'm here."
Yes. And so maybe on the other end of the scale, perhaps top tips for a lapsed player.
Yes,
Perhaps we've got a mature a person who used to play and they've just
yes.
gone back into it.
I've met a few. I've been doing these. It started in lockdown. Zoom for Benslow flute courses, and we've had a couple on the course who are what I think would term themselves as laps players. I don't know whether it's because on Zoom we're here in our own room, and yes, you are sharing because I'm the other side of the screen, but it gives you maybe a little bit more sort of comfort that you're here giving it a whirl on your own. Um, so maybe, yeah, just see if you can find, while we've got this extra bit of time, one of those sort of Zoom courses. I would definitely send you to Benslow. It's a centre for amateur music makers, and it's very inclusive. So and having something like that, having some sort of incentive, if you like,
Hmm.
you've got to log in, turn up, play, might not feel very comfortable, but it's something that's gonna motivate you or give you that extra security, if you like, and of course access to a teacher. And if it wasn't sort of this strange time we're living in, I would just say, yeah, find a good teacher, find somebody you can go and play duets with, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Play
some
along with your duets if they can.
go and play along with me and play duets. And there's a range of duets. So there's you know, right from beginner. I mean, my Mozarts are not for beginners, but you know, Wonderful Winds, they've got some fantastic duets for, you know, I think grade 0 even.
Yeah.
So do go and allow yourself that option to put yourself under a little bit of, you know, pressure to connect with your music. And music is a sharing sort of genre, and I think if you're doing it on your own, that's a bit, you know, it's more fun if you can
Yeah.
get to that point where you can interact.
Yeah, and I suppose then if you're sort of meeting with friends via Zoom, then you can say, I've just been practicing this, and you can show people and
Yeah,
showcase what you've been doing and playing.
exactly.
Because
And you have, you know, you have got that mute button as well. So certainly on my Benslow flute courses, you know, we can go and try things out, and we don't have to always share. You know, you can just say, oh, yeah, I'm working on that mute.
yeah.
And then when you've got it, you go, I'm here.
Yes, I've arrived. Fantastic. Yeah, lovely, lovely. Okay, so right, we are getting through. We haven't got too many more to go now. So if you have any more you want to send in, just feel free to add them up. But most players seem to get a dry mouth when playing due to nerves. I get more saliva and have to swallow more. What can I do?
That's an interesting one because I've not experienced that. And I haven't had any pupils mention that one to me in the past either. So I haven't really got many sort of, you know, experiences to draw on that one. I do know myself, I've done it and oh, really regretted it. Have had an apple or something in the interval, disaster, because that was saliva. So there are certain fruits, vegetables that I have to avoid just before playing. And I think certainly playing wooden instruments, you know, they get saturated. So I do actually try and limit
Mm,
the amount that I drink before. You know,
yeah.
yeah, I would have my glass of water sitting here, and I do when I'm teaching. But if I'm doing a concert, it's cold, and you're going to produce a lot of moisture. You actively just don't drink too much
Mm.
before. I mean, it's the same if you're playing in churches, and you know you can't get to the loo and back in the interval because there's only one, and the whole audience.
Yes, absolutely.
You just don't have a drink for the
Yeah.
2 hours
Or
before
if
you.
you want to absorb some saliva, I think an oat cake usually does not, you know,
Ah,
that
oatcake's a
would be
good one. Yeah, but you know you do have to sort of, you know,
yeah.
it is a hazard of playing the flute. I do have to think about what I'm eating before and during performances. And you might find, yeah, an oat cake or you know, something for you that stops that, because
Mm.
that is very frustrating. And I can,
Yeah, although I think when I used to play oboe, you know, you all the read all that, just yeah, bit Grace, you don't
you
really
don't
want to
really
eat too
want to be
much. No, I
disappointed.
don't really want to eat an oat cake, really.
No, you don't. No, but if whoever wrote in, you know, has any success, you know, let me
Yeah,
know.
yeah, do let us know,
Question comes up again.
definitely. So on the note of sort of like nerves and things, do you have any sustainable strategies to deal with performance anxiety?
Oh, that's a really big one. Um, in a nutshell, I think experience helps hugely. Being in your comfort zone. What does being in your comfort zone mean? Well, it means you're playing a piece that you really know, that you're really comfortable with. You're playing to people that you're happy to play to in an environment that you're happy with. And each time you need to sort of build on that. So, you know, if it's a really difficult piece, then try and play that somewhere where you've played before. Um, and you know, build it up. I
Hmm.
think the worst we can do when we're feeling nervous is then go and avoid confronting it in a way. So
Mm.
um I know that's really really difficult, and I'm aware how uncomfortable people are when they are nervous. And I think the only thing I can really say is that, you know, don't forget in in a, I know it sounds really stupid, but you know, the point of playing your music is to share something that you're loving, and you shouldn't lose sight of that. So okay, you've spent many hours perfecting that one bar, you've spent a lot of time putting energy into putting yourself forward. Maybe it's for an exam or an audition, but when you get there, just remember what you're doing, which is playing beautiful music. And I know from an examiner's perspective, because I've often gone in and done final recitals and things at music colleges and for postgrads and things, and I've hated walking into the room and the look of fear they give me. I'm just a human being that loves music, and I'm there because I love music, and I don't want to be making that person really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But clearly I'm sitting there behind a desk with my pen in my hand, and I've got to give them a mark. But that doesn't detract from the fact that actually I just want to sit back and enjoy listening to great music, and those performers who manage to do that, manage to remember that actually what they're doing is playing something amazing and sharing that.
Yeah.
And that's gotten that what would make you nervous about that? Absolutely nothing. So
Oh yes, you'd be a fantastic examiner. I wish you were my examiner. I think the word there is it's play, isn't it? It's
yeah,
not about getting to the end. It's about playing, and however long that is. But
exactly. And unfortunately there are pieces that make us very nervous, and I would be lying if I sat here and said I'm not nervous. I mean, actually the next concert that we're doing, this Nielsen that I was talking about, there were some bars that I just have to shut my eyes because it looks terrifying, and I've played it wrong so many times when I've practiced. But I'm hoping that when it comes to the performance, that's live stream, by the way, so you can find out whether I could.
Oh yeah.
There are plenty of bars. But I hope that when it comes to it, I'm not thinking about that. I'm wrapped up in the music, and I will probably shut my eyes, because that's another top tip. It tends to look terrifying, lots of blackness and
Yes.
and scary ledger lines. Just don't look.
Yeah.
You'll know it. You've practiced it.
Yeah. And I suppose if you listen to those difficult parts enough as well, then you get it in your ear. And another tip that I heard was it's about blowing music up, blowing those things up, because if it looks bigger, it's easy to read. It doesn't look quite so
That's a really good idea.
There you go. Yeah. Well,
it's going to be exploded tomorrow.
Just try. Well, you'll have to report back and let me know if it works.
Thank you. I will do that.
So we are heading into exam season. I know you've been busy preparing pupils recently. What's the best way for musicians to prepare themselves for those auditions and exams?
Well, I'm going to share with you something that my lovely teacher in Holland, Wilbert, many, many years ago told me about, which has stuck with me and I use a lot. He told me just before my finals, postgrad finals over in Holland, to go away the weekend before and just sing everything. Because, you've done the practice, those pieces. Just go and sing them, because I think that connects in with that thing that I was saying, that it's the music that's got to come across. It's not whether your technique, and I know that you'll know those pieces by then. I'm going to have that as a given. Now, if it's a question of I don't actually know the music terribly well, then that's the easy answer. Just go and learn it. Learn it so that you can't play it wrong, that you can play it upside down, inside out, back to front, up, from memory, of course, improvise on it, around it. But most importantly, when you get into that exam audition, it's the music that's got to come across. So make sure that you've connected with the music inside you. So I don't think there's a better way of doing that actually than sort of putting the instrument away, going away, go for a nice long walk and just sing it through in your head. Be careful going on that walk.
Especially if it's very high. Yeah, because the instrument should feel like an extension of you. So if the music's got
absolutely. And unfortunately for a lot of us, if you're doing an audition and it's a set piece, there's 150 versions of it they may hear. Same with associated board. You may be the fourth person that's come in that day with playing that same piece. And it's all about how how you see it. There isn't a wrong or a right way of playing any piece of music, and that should feel liberating in itself.
Yeah.
I know we compare ourselves all the time, and we shouldn't, because actually, who wants an identical, I don't want to play it the same as the person next door to me, actually, if I really look at it. So although I'm sort of comparing, actually don't, because you need to bring your own voice.
Definitely. Right, so if you haven't been at a specialist music school, how do you know if you'll thrive in that environment?
Well, that's a really good question. We do open days, we do flute days, we do a summer school. There are lots of ways actually to come and experience a specialist music school environment. And I would really encourage also people to have a chat to the people who are there, to the people who've been. Obviously, it's an individual experience, but I think you can't, there's loads of ways of trying to connect. Obviously, right now you can't go and visit the schools. You can only do it on open days, and in which case I would, pick up a phone or Zoom and chat, not to the teachers, but to the people who are at the school. Ask them, how is it? What does it feel like? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages?
So you mentioned there, what life's like a little bit now. So how's lockdown been for you? Since maybe March.
In March, it was a particularly bad time actually for lockdown. For me personally, I mean, and for my colleagues who are in the Baroque flute world, because we have this wonderful Matthew Passion by J.S. Bach, and there's 4 flutes in the Matthew Passion. So, that's our peak season. And my first Matthew Passion was cancelled the night before. And what I'm sure everyone would recognise is that, it's not just the hours practiced before. I mean, if for that big solo, the Ausliebe, for example, I've played it many, many, many times. I would be able to play it to you right now. But it's more getting into the sort of spirit of, a bit like a sort of character actor, if you like. That particular flute solo, it's, Mary Magdalene looking up at her son who's being nailed to a cross and being crucified. It's a harrowing moment, and emotionally I need to sort of get in the mood for that. I was ready to play that solo the night before. And then it was cancelled, and then everyone was cancelled afterwards. So that was devastating at the time, really, really devastating. I was just not ready to have all of that cancelled, and I was so prepared for it, for the concerts, that is. So that was really, really tough actually. But I learnt how to Zoom teach.
Yes, I think a lot of people have become a bit more acquainted with Zoom now.
I put together we did the very, very first online course at Benslow, because I recognised that my Telemann Fantasias, for example, I taught them so many times in NFA in America and in Canada, and for my students here in England. So I knew I could deliver that one. And my brother, by chance, is a Zoom consultant. So he gave me the confidence that I needed to pick up the phone and go to Benslow. I can do this. I can deliver this. So very grateful to the flute players who risked and took a chance really on it. And that was all the way back in April. And then I did another one in May, and I did another one in July, and we're doing one in half term. And
yes, I'll have to get all the details.
Yes.
If anybody wants to know, then you must contact me.
It's Benslow, Benslow, and they run music courses. And I've worked in Benslow. It's wonderful, up at Hitchin, so north of London. and it was bequeathed to the nation. This amazing house, and it's a centre for courses. They run about 200, if not more, a year. It's absolutely
Wow, that's huge.
phenomenal, their timetabling of courses. And at the moment, they're doing some live, but most are online. And for flute players, do come along. We are lovely. I do it with my dearest colleague, Sarah Murphy, who's in my festive flute quartet. We worked together in Flutes in Tuscany, which was so devastating. We cancelled that in February, knowing that we wouldn't fly in Italy. So that's been devastating that hasn't happened. But we'll be back. Will be back. It'll all happen. And concerts going forwards, they're all suddenly live streamed, which my first one is coming up. I'll let you know afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to draw some positives from this situation, that things have become quite accessible, isn't it? So
they have, and yes, I mean, it's a lot of recording. I do feel as if I was not really trained to do this, but
I wasn't trained to do this.
You just think, oh well, it's a new string to our bow. I mean, it'll be very interesting going forwards. I mean, I am obviously very worried for many of my colleagues, what the future will look like. But I do know that in lockdown we have all, haven't we, turned to music in a very big way. So quietly, I'm confident that we will come out the other side, and we will be better off for for the music that's been going on, and we'll leap out from
definitely. We won't be retraining as plumbers anytime soon. Just a final couple. Oh gosh, good time. So I think maintaining motivation to practice with no targets. Well, I think if you've got to find those targets in these situations, haven't you? If you've got
I think so. Yes. I mean, you can always, you can always find a course. I think there are quite a few of them online. But if you can't, fix a date to maybe record yourself, that wonderful, what do you call it? Voice. What's it?
I don't know. I'm not in that. Yes, at the moment. But there is that new exam board, so that you can pre-record, you can do a performance in your own home and send it. So you can still prepare yourself for an exam without.
I've been doing that a cappella app. I mean, it's no fun at all. But do you know what? You can have a giggle.
Oh, so when you record different parts, and you play.
You can record yourself, and then you can record on top of yourself, and it's quite fun. I mean, I've wasted hours and hours and hours having a go. The only slight problem is the sound isn't very good. So don't be too critical when you listen back. But have some fun.
And
it's a target. If you think, okay, well, I'll record that next week. Just go and do it.
Go and do it. And have you found that students are more or less dedicated to learning during lockdown?
I like that. They've certainly been very bored. Shall I leave it at that? And therefore, flute practices happened. Rather a lot more, I would say, than probably when they're at school. But yes and no. I think we've all benefited actually from having a bit of extra time to go and maybe tackle that scale that we really didn't want to do.
Yes, definitely. And then, so final question: your favourite piece of music to play or to listen to?
Oh, I love that question. I'm probably going to go back to my old Matthew Passion actually, and just hope that at Easter I'll be playing it.
Definitely, I really hope to.
I think I'm probably going to go back to Bach. I love Bach.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're going to wrap up then. So I just want to say, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a lot of fun. All our conversations that we've had leading up to tonight, they've always been really, we've laughed an awful lot, and it's been wonderful. So thank you so much. I do genuinely feel like I've learned lots, especially about not blowing too hard. That is really like really awful now. And the flutter tonguing, awesome too. Thank you for that. And so I just want to say then a final tip. thank you to everyone that's watched tonight, whoever or wherever you are. Thank you. Your support really does mean that we can continue to hold these events. I'm sorry for the slightly glitchy start, but I hope it hasn't didn't put you off. So if you've enjoyed tonight, please tell somebody else. Okay, tag someone in a comment, share the video with a recommendation, or like us on Facebook. Let's keep spreading the word. That would be awesome. You can actually catch up with all my previous interviews on the John Packer YouTube page, as well as our Facebook page. I've spoken to Yamaha artists Matilda Lloyd and Rob Burton. They were both young musician finalists. Rob Burton was a finalist. Dennis Wick, buffet artist Andrew Mariner, Christopher Bill in America, Snake Davis, and last month Anessa Johnson, who's also in America. So my 9th session, I can't believe I'm saying the 9th, will be next month, November the 25th, and we'll be back to saxophones with Naomi Sullivan, a Dodaro artist, a professional tutor, and a roommate I haven't seen for 20 years. So this is going to be really fun and interesting. It's going to be quite the nostalgia trip. We weren't quite Bananarama either of us, but we had some interesting times. So I do hope you'll join me again, armed with your saxophone questions, not what we were like as students. So keep an eye for all those details, and do continue to share information about our events. You will be able to rewatch tonight's event straight away on Facebook, and I will be editing it for YouTube shortly. And finally, a big thanks to Pearl once more for sponsoring tonight's webinar. We can't wait to receive our stock of the latest Pearl Elegante Primo flutes. We do get in touch if you're interested in trying it, or indeed any of the Pearl range. You know, as I mentioned before, we can send instruments to you for trial on approval. There is no commitment to purchase, but just have a go. If you want to just try head joints, a wooden head joint, anything, we are there to help you. So speaking of the shop, I'm delighted to tell you we're also going to be opening again on Saturdays from the beginning of November. It's always helpful if we do know you're planning a trip, but you don't have to. So do feel free to turn up, come and visit us. We would like to see you. And so that's it. Thanks again, Elizabeth. We do look forward to welcoming you into the John Packer showroom again. Perhaps next year. Best wishes for the next year. I really hope you get to play those pieces again, and do keep in touch. Thanks again. And so to everybody that's watched, just keep music alive and keep enjoying your music. Find reasons to play. Okay. Yes. And so, good night. Bye. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Bye.